Welcome back to another episode of Health is Wealth. And thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. And as always, I am beyond grateful and thankful from the bottom of my heart to each and every one of you who is tuning into today's episode and also tuning in to help support the podcast. As every week we are sharing a new episode once a week, just sharing words and thoughts of hope, inspiration, and motivation, hopefully to bring value into your world, just things that I'm going through and learning on my own journey that we call life. And so thank you once again for being here. And for today's topic, what I wanted to talk to you about is the saying I hear quite often, and it's just a constant reminder in life. And I'm not sure where the origin of it is from, but the saying goes as is. What you're not changing, you are choosing. And what it means is that if there's something in your life that you're complaining about and you're not actually doing something to change it, then you're absolutely choosing it. And I think it's an important reminder, right? Because so often we go through things in life and there's things that we're not satisfied with, and it could be on a spectrum of things. Oftentimes people aren't satisfied with the life that they're living, with the jobs that they're at, with the things that they're doing, right? Sometimes not satisfied with the money in the bank account, the way their body looks, all these different things in life. But most time people just complain about it, and we often get into these comfort zones of just complain. And we forget, I think, sometimes that, you all have a choice. Everybody has a choice to change anything in their life. Obviously kids have to wait till they're adults, right? Because they got parents who make those decisions for them. But ultimately, as an adult, our freedom of choice of becoming an adult is making up our own mind, making up our own choices. And nobody's really held up against their will, right? And so, it's just that reminder that, we should always be doing an inventory in our life and every part of it to make sure that we are content with everything in our lives. Because if there's certain things that we are not content with and we're complaining about it, but yet do nothing to make it different, then my friend, you're choosing it. It's your problem. It's your life. It's your circumstances. The things that are happening in our lives are results of our actions ultimately, because even though certain things may not, have been our fault initially, if we allow certain things to take place and we're not, happy with certain things happening in our lives, if we don't move away from it, if we don't change something that's going to change that, part of it, then, we're pretty much choosing it, and so it's just important to know that we should always be happy, right? With every area in our lives. We should always be content. We should be satisfied, And I think this is always important because, the years go by, the time flies by, time passes ultimately. And what I don't think anybody truly wants at the end of it is getting to a point in their life to where they have to look back and be like, did that really go as I planned? Did that really go the way I wanted it to go? Was I happy with that? Was I happy with that decision? Was I happy with how my life went? And I think there's a lot of people who unfortunately get to their elderly years and have to reflect back on it and realize they settled for things in life. They didn't really choose their happiness. They didn't really change things that they were complaining about. And they just settled for it and ultimately have to live with this, reality that they can't go back in time. They can't change things, And even if their circumstances in the meantime, they could change if they're not happy about. Sometimes it's a little too late on certain things, right? And it's just always important to make sure that in every aspect part of your life, you're happy with how things are going, with where you're at, with what you're doing, with any of these things that you can think of come to mind as we speak. And I'm sure it's different for everybody. I mean, it's hard not to say that, that there isn't anybody who has something about their life that they wish was better or, would change or whatever it could be. And so the point of this message, though, is to remember, that we have two choices, either change it or realize that we are choosing it, But I think we get stuck in these comfort zones and complaining so much, we actually forget that, life isn't a sentence, right? Life is a choice. Oftentimes, I think people go a certain direction in life, do certain things, settle for a certain life, thinking it's some sort of punishment, some sort of life's, sentence. Well, I'm not happy with this aspect or that part of my life or the way things are going here or how this is. And so what else am I going to do but just accept it, and it's what it is. And there's nothing I can do to change it. But that's not the reality. You see what I'm saying? The reality is you get to choose anything about anything in your life at any split second of the day. It doesn't matter if you decide at 6 in the morning, 12 in the afternoon, or 12 at midnight. You know, the glorious thing about being alive, the glorious thing about having God, the glorious thing about being a free country, being an adult, is having that freedom of choice to decide. And so, you know, I hope you hear this well, and I hope it resonates with you, you know, because sometimes we do need that reminder that, you know, if there's anything in your life that you're complaining about and you're not changing it, then you are absolutely choosing that, you know. They say in life, you know, it's not about, you know, the things you have, but it's essentially about the things you tolerate, I guess, you know, and meaning like if things aren't going the way that you want them to in life, if there's certain areas you're not really happy with, content with, satisfied with, or whatever it is, there's nobody else to blame but yourself at the end of the day. As much as it's easier to try to point the finger at anybody else for why this is, why that is, why you're not happy, why your bank account's not the way you want it to be, why you don't have that dream job, why you don't have that dream life, whatever it may be. But ultimately it's you know, and that can be the hardest reality to swallow sometimes because, you know, oftentimes I think when we try to blame other people or point the fingers at, you know, why it isn't your fault, you know, it's easy to try to find somebody else because then you're like, well, if it's somebody else's fault, then somebody else has to fix it. And oftentimes when you realize it's you, the person in the mirror, that's a hard reality to swallow because you realize, well, you put yourself in that position, you know. But I think the plus side to that is that realization then leads you to be like, well, I can take myself out of it too, you know. So if you're not happy in a certain area, guess what? You could decide to be happy, you know. And just because you've been used to a certain lifestyle, just because you've been used to certain things, just because of whatever it may be in life, does not mean you don't get to change. Doesn't mean you can't decide different. Doesn't mean you know, because you've gone down this path, you can't go down that path, or maybe this thing made you happy before, not quite so happy anymore, so you're going to go down this path, which is going to make you happy. But I think the biggest point here to be made is, you know, we got to not be stuck, you know. I think sometimes we act as these NPCs, right, if you will, and we just stay in this autopilot mode, you know. We don't realize, like, we are the main characters, you know. We are our main stories. We get to decide, we get to choose, we get to be what it is that we want to be, and our lives get to be what it is that we want to be. So stop staying stuck. Stop feeling like there's no way out. Stop feeling like if there's a situation you don't like or you're not happy with, you know, again, some of those examples, right? Like, you know, maybe you don't like your bank account, your body, or the job that you're having. Who's keeping you there? Who's absolutely forcing you to keep that body, to keep that bank account, to keep that job, to keep that life? Nobody. Absolutely nobody. But it could be hard to admit that. It could be hard to realize there's going to be work to change because change is scary. Change takes time. Change is unfamiliar. There's a lot of different things on why I believe this is what it is. And it's so easier just to sit there and complain about it versus putting into work to actually making things happen and work and change and do the necessary things necessary in order for you to live a happy life. But the most important thing to hear from this is your life has to be happy in every single area and aspect of it. Because if it's not, then why are you here? Why did God put you on this earth, you know, another day, if it wasn't to absolutely make sure that you're happy in every area in your life? A lot of people like to settle because it's easier to settle, because once you settle, you accept reality and then you keep on plugging away. You know, if you realize that you don't want to settle, you want more, you want that thing to change to make you happier, that thing to change to make you happier, well, now, friends, the real work begins. And that can be a lot harder, you see. And so don't stay stuck in life, right? Just realize you always have the power to choose and decide. And, you know, the things that you were complaining about, you can change it. And if you absolutely don't, then how can anybody feel sorry for you, you know? Because it's ultimately in your hands, in your power to do that, to change it. How many people didn't like things, you know, about certain parts of their life and they changed it and became better for it and happier for it? Not to say any of it's easy, but what's important, easy or your happiness in making sure every area is the way that you want it. I'm changing a lot of different things about areas in my life that I want to better myself in and, you know, will make me happier, right? Changing my body. I'm on my journey, you know, getting fit, getting all this stuff, you know, wanting to increase, you know, my bank account, you know, working more, trying to figure out better ways to make money, all these different things, you know. And so, but I'm in action, I'm doing things, I'm progressing, I'm making, you know, moves that are going to change those things so that I am, you know, happier with the outcomes and the results and the life that I'm living and all of that. So, as always, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. And just remember, if you're not changing it and you're complaining about it, you're absolutely choosing it. So choose to decide today to do whatever it's going to take to make sure that every area of your life is exactly the way that you want it, because that's why God put you here and that's why you are here for. So as always, we will see you on the next one.